And there we go. Shall we let people in? Are we ready?
Do this.
All right. Admit all. Here comes 17 more people. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our extra webinar. No one has their camera on. I'm wondering if there is a reason. There we go. Hey, Alexis.
Hey Al, go ahead and do one thing. Put Alexia as a co-host so she'll be at the top.
All right, thank you. All right, there we go.
And Larissa already is okay.
I didn't. If anybody, Haley, or if anybody else sees people who need to be admitted, please feel free to take the initiative to do that. And we will get rolling in just a second. All right, I see someone here who is logged in as 912. 912-282-8611. Just going to suggest that if you want to put your name in there, we can make sure that you get credit for this. You may not be able to do that because it sounds like you're on your phone. But if you have the ability to tell me in the chat who you are, that'll make sure we can give you credit for this. This is a great crowd, and let's let some more people in. There we go. Hello, everyone. This is a good crowd. Thank you all for coming here for our extra webinar. Rolling up toward 34 people. That's excellent. We will get rolling in just a second. Does anybody have any jokes? In the spirit of George Broad, I always ask for jokes when we start something like this. There we go. Look at that. We're up to 38 people. That's great. There's some
All
more
right,
people.
Al, it's 5 o'clock and I'll do the waiting room. I mean, I'll let people
Okay.
know.
All right. Well, let's get rolling then. Thank you, Laree. So everybody, welcome to the Extra February Cares webinar. My name is Alvin Cotton. I am the database coordinator for the Georgia Council, but more importantly, I am a person in long-term recovery. What that means to me is that it has been 22 years since I felt the need to take a drink to deal with my anxiety, my loneliness, my depression, or my legal problems. I work for recovery to make sure that every time someone seeks recovery, I want there to be a peer across the table from them because they can be the best help. Today's webinar will be a panel discussion recognizing Black History Month and Women's History Month with panelists from the GC4R Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. The discussion will feature insights on Black Americans' many impacts on the visual arts, music, and cultural movements, as well as a discussion related to women who advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This will be an interactive webinar, so we will ask for your engagement and participation. This is a few housekeeping notes. Those who stay for the entirety of the webinar until 6:30 will receive 1.5 CEUs. And when you submit them, please keep track of the information. It says February 2024 extra webinar celebrating Black and Women's History, Greg Gardner, moderator. You will receive a certificate for this training probably sometime next week from me, Alvin Cotton. We are asking you to remain muted throughout the entirety of the presentation unless called on, but you can put questions in the chat and we will be checking it as we go along. And I think about halfway through, we're going to pause and see what questions we need to answer. And we will do our best to answer all the questions, and I may mute you if I see that you're unmuted. Please make sure that the name on your screen is correct so that you will get credit for it if you are wanting to use this as one of your CEUs. The certificate will come in the name that's on the screen, so make sure that you have the right one. Sometimes people will borrow a login from someone and the name may not match up. And please make sure your pronouns are listed if we need them to be able to address you properly. No vaping or smoking on camera, please. And we suggest, and that's it. All right, first, let's do a poll and see who is here. There we go. Can y'all see that? All right.
No, did you launch it?
I have.
Launch.
Maybe a problem with the people who are logged in under the login. Can other people see it? Michael says he can see it.
Yeah, I saw it.
Great.
All right. Are people answering it? I may need
Yes,
someone else to share it.
I see the screen. I see the results on my end.
Okay.
So far, we have about 29 peers who have submitted it.
All right. We'll
9
give them
out of
just another
36.
second. And Haley, are you able to share that result?
We'll see when I hit end poll.
All right.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end it now.
Okay.
I'm going to share the results. Do y'all see the results?
Will you take a picture of it for me, please? Thank you. Oh, okay. There we go. Is that down, Haley? All right. Thank you. All right. So thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to introduce today's moderator. That's Greg Gardner. He is a person in long-term recovery from alcohol use disorder and works at the North Georgia Medical Center as a AUD coach. He has dedicated his life to serving those with AUD, and he believes that with recovery, an individual can become the person they were intended to be and want to be. All right, so Greg, I'm gonna spotlight you. There you go.
Hey there, I'm Greg, and I am a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me, it's been 2,346 days since I've used alcohol to pretend to be someone that I am not. I am honored today to moderate this panel, an incredible group of panelists, and a panel to celebrate Black History Month and Women's History Month. The purpose of today is, can I get the purpose slide, please? Yes, is to increase level of awareness of Black history and women's history, experience personal testimonials of related life experiences, promote allyship for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and explore ways to promote DEI at home, at work, and in our communities. And we have an incredible panel to share with you. I would like to introduce each panel member, or I will introduce them. They will introduce themselves. I will call on each one. They'll introduce themselves. After that, we'll call on the next, introduce themselves. And with that, Alexia, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Alexia Jones. I am a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me, it's been 28 years since I had a need or desire to use any mind-altering substances. It means that I am a mother, I am a grandmother. I am also in support of my mother in her eldership. I am also the founder and director of Rise Theater, and I'm so glad to be here tonight to have this wonderful discussion.
Thank you very much. Larissa, can you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, everybody. This is Larissa Guerrero. I am a woman in long-term recovery. And what that means to me is that it's been over 9 years since I've used any further complicated tobacco. And due to my recovery, I have the opportunity to be an active member of my family again, get to be longing to see the world, and she'll never have to experience the burden of being in addiction. So to serve as the executive director of the Georgia Council for Recovery, where we get to promote recovery and Georgia's communities through education, advocacy, training, and peer recovery support services. Glad to be here tonight.
Thank you, Larissa. I don't know if it was muffled for everyone.
There
It
was an issue with the audio there. I don't know what we need to do about it.
Yeah, it was fine at first, before we came on, you might have to just like turn or something.
Thank you, Larissa. Haley, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Haley Sherlock, and I am the CARES Program Team Lead at the Georgia Council for Recovery, but most importantly, I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that it's been over 4 years since I had the need to change my reality with any mood or mind-altering substances. Thank you all so much for being here with us and having this amazing conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes.
Thank you, Haley. Tara, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm Tara Jackson. I'm the training and outreach. Okay, could y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I'm the training and outreach coordinator for the Georgia Council for Recovery. More importantly, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means to me is it been over 10 years since I had a drink or a drug or a mental health situation that I didn't have the coping skill to deal with. I am a proud mother and wife and family member, and I sit on some great boards with organizations that want to help the community. Thank y'all for being here, and I'm grateful to be here myself.
Thank you. And last but not least, Reggie, tell us who you are.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reggie Magruder. I am the peer workforce coordinator for the Georgia Council for Recovery. But most importantly, I am a man in long-term recovery. It's been over 3 years since I felt the need to put anything to my mind or my body to alter my reality. Reality is okay with me today because of recovery. I am very, very honored to be here. This is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. Discovering who I was through the process of studying Black history has actually allowed me to become the man that I am today. So I'm extremely happy to be here and looking forward to having this discussion.
Great. Thank you for introducing yourself, everybody. And I'll give a brief description of what we'll be doing, and we will get started. Have a series of questions covering Black History Month, Women's History Month, recovery, the workplace, other things. Answer each question how you feel you're led to answer, what that question means to you, how you want to respond. The first few questions I will start, and I will address specific panelists to get the conversation going. Once that panelist answers the question, all of the panelists feel free to jump in. I won't be calling on you. Just let's have a conversation. I'll stay out of it and just engage. I may ask a follow-up question every now and then or call on someone specific, but it's your discussion. And with that, probably about halfway through, like Al said, we will check for questions from the audience, see what they might want to ask, and then we'll get back to the other questions. If we don't get to them all, it's okay. We got plenty. We got plenty of time to do this. So with that, Alexia, I am going to call on you first.
Okay.
And the theme for this year's Black History Month is African Americans and the Arts, spanning the many impacts Black Americans have had on visual arts, music, cultural movements, and more. Share your experience with the arts of any kind in your recovery and how you have used the arts to impact the recovery of others.
I love that question. I started using the arts at the very beginning of my recovery process. When I walked into the rooms of the traditional way of recovery, AA, NA, I did not find that to be beneficial to me because most of those meetings, well, no one in there looked like me. And so I needed a space that I could freely express myself. I was a professional dancer, studied at Florida State University, danced with theater companies all over the United States and even outside of the States. And so that was my first language. Dance and movement was my first language. I loved dancing since I was a kid. I used to dance to James Brown and, oh my goodness, the mashed potatoes, and that was a release for me. And then I started studying ballet, African dance, and that was just a way for me to just release. I was told when I was a little girl that I had too much energy. And so when it came time for me to deal with my internal issues, I started to dance and I started to come to the core of my trauma through movement. I went from being a technical dancer to a dancer that expressed herself where there were no words. You know, there's a part of the brain that has no words. And so dance was just a part of it. I mean, I've gone from just being a dancer to a visual artist to a poet to a songwriter. There's so many different modalities, and a drummer. There's so many different ways for us to express ourselves. I was in love with Judith Jamison from the Avenaley Dance Theater. Just in love with the jazz musicians of our day, with Theodotus Monk and oh, so many. I can't think of everybody off the top of my head. Billie Holiday, Nina Simone. Oh my goodness. Woo! Just thinking about their music that just really got us through. I'm a 60s baby, so it really got us through some tumultuous times. The music, the words that really express what we were going through as a African American community, and dance and music is where I found my healing. Fast forward in 2013 when I became a CARES. I found out that I could live my life out loud. I could live my recovery out loud. And that's when I went to the Georgia Council for Recovery and was like, you know, I would like to try this pathway called Art and Recovery. And initially it was not embraced. However, when we put the Claritin call out there, I found that I wasn't the only person in recovery that loved music and dance and poetry to express themselves. And so hence came the Rise. You know, and at Rise, we embrace our recovery. We are restored, inspired, supported, empowered, and we evolve through every modality of the arts you can think of. So although arts was an intricate part of my growing up, then the arts became my voice to be able to share my story, to heal, and to release. I never forget the first time I danced in my recovery program. I wept and I cried. And at that time, I did not know that the arts and dance really released the trauma that lived within my body. And so we all know that the body keeps the score. So my experience with the arts have saved my life and is an intricate part of my culture. And I'm so glad to be able to be in a position where I can share that with the world and share that with my peers and introduce to the world that there's another pathway to recovery.
Wow. Panelist? Tara, I saw you getting into that.
Yeah. So when I listen to Alexa and I hear her, you know, talk about music and dance, it just really does something to my heart, because I don't know early on, starting a recovery journey, how I could have gotten through without music. I do not know how I could have got through. I remember certain songs or being certain places and hearing that song. I remember having to ride on a van to go to meetings, and one of the staff would, I would have a moment and it would be like a teary-eyed moment. And she had gotten used to that moment with me. And some of the other women would be like, "Is Tara okay?" And she'd be like, "Yeah, she's just fine." And I can remember those songs, from gospel to Blues to, and just naming Billie Holiday and Stephanie
Mhm.
Mills and all those people. And, and when I get in a moment now, that's one of the ways I push the restart button is listening to music. So yes, thank you for sharing that, Alexis. I really appreciate that. And thank you for creating a space for so many people that I see, I hear about. I mean, when I see certain peers just bright up at the thought, sharing that space with you. So thank you for having the courage to step out there. Because like you say, I remember it was just a thought and now it's a space.
Yes, it's actually a space. It is a pathway.
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
thank you.
Anyone else? Hey, Reggie.
Yes,
Continuing
sir.
Black History Month, can you all share some information about how Black history, education, and awareness has impacted your life in recovery? And what about that would you like to see improve in our lifetime?
Oh, wow. Absolutely. I can share some information about that. Black history education, in particular, not only plays a huge part in my recovery from substance use, it plays a huge part in my recovery from feeling less than, of feeling like I wasn't equal to. I'm going to go back a little bit. I was born in 1964. I was born in Houston, Texas, and I grew up in it's called Third Ward. If you've ever been to Houston, if you heard about Third Ward, you would know. It's like 10 times as bad as Bankhead. It's a really bad area. I actually went to the same high school that George Floyd went to. He's a little younger than I am, so he came after me, but I literally went to school with his brother and his sister. But what Black history, learning about Black history allowed me to do, guys, is that I was, as a young boy, my earliest memory or my earliest self-image of myself was that I was less than, that I was not as good as, that I didn't deserve equality, that I didn't deserve to be treated fairly. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you want to look at it, it was because of the way I was conditioned and the way I was socialized in the country that I grew up in at the time that I grew up in it. I can just remember this feeling of shame because of, not because of who I was. I thought who I was would never matter because of what I was. I can remember my mother sitting me down one day and she says, son, I need to tell you something. You're not just a little boy. She says, you're a little Black boy. And I was like, well, I know that. She said, well, let me explain to you what that means. You can't go here. You can't say that. You can't look like that. You need to smile whenever you're around them white folk. Excuse my language, but that's what my mother told me. She says, I don't care how you feeling, you better smile when you get around those people. I can remember I had a little white girlfriend named Dora. She wasn't my girlfriend. I was 6 or 7. She was my friend. My mother whopped me upside the head. She said, boy, if you don't stay away from that little white girl, the movies I would watch, I can remember being a kid watching Tarzan, and I just seen this white guy with this blonde hair flying through the trees and all of these Black guys running around with grass skirts on and bones in their noses. And that's who I identified with. That was me. That was me. So learning, in order for me to ever understand who I was, guys, I had to understand who I wasn't. I was not less than, because society told me that because of the color of my skin. And that was really, really, really difficult to overcome. I went through busing. They picked us up, all Black kids in my neighborhood, and they took us to all white schools. And for the first time, I was called the N-word. And I want to tell you something, it worked. It worked because I felt like I was the lowest of the lowest of the low. I felt lower than a dog. I was an N-word because that's what they call me. Every single thing around me screamed that that's what I was. The conditions I lived in, the food I ate, the clothes I wore, the car my mother drove, everything screamed to me that that's what I was. So fast forwarding, that contributed to my addiction, guys, because I felt like I needed, I'm supposed to be high, I'm supposed to be drunk, I'm supposed to be in prison because I was that thing in America that means you're lower than a dog. That's what I felt. However, probably in my early 20s, I started to learn some things that brought me out of that, guys, and told me that I wasn't that. I joined the Nation of Islam, and I learned some things about history that I was never taught in school. It allowed me to hold my head up a little bit higher. I learned about the great civilizations in Timbuktu and Mali and Kenya, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before any of this stuff that we call Europe ever. So that gave me some pride. And what that has done for me in my recovery, guys, is number one, it blew my high. I couldn't get high the same anymore. When I found out who I really was, when I learned the truth, I thought that a bunch of guys got on some ships and went to Africa and captured some guys with cotton sacks on there. They didn't capture slaves. I didn't understand that. They captured free men and women, husbands, fathers, daughters, wives. And they transported them and they turned them into slaves. So I was not a slave. I didn't come from the descendant of a slave. And that mentality is what kept me in my addiction for so long. But when I started to learn that that is not who I was, that is not who I came from, it absolutely blew my high. I couldn't get high the same anymore. I'd be sitting in the dope house, everybody, and I'd be going like, dude, this is not you. Do you understand the obligation that you have? Do you understand that you come from the only subgroup of human beings on this planet who have ever been transported on the other side of the world, uprooted from everything, their culture, their language, their religion, from everything? Do you understand that you come from the only subgroup of humans on this planet who have had laws, policies, and practices put in place deliberately to keep them down, and yet you overcame that? Do you understand who you are? So it completely blew my high. I couldn't get high the same anymore. I'd be sitting there like, dude, you do not belong here, right? And what it does to my recovery, guys, is that it lets me know that I have an obligation to honor those before me who sacrificed their lives, their blood, their sweat, and their tears.
We're with you. I heard you talk about the pride and who you are.
I have an obligation to those who came before me, and for those of us who are fighting now, and for those who are going to come after me. That's what has allowed me to do in my recovery. It gives me a whole level of focus. It gives me a whole nother level of accountability that people don't even know. Thanks for letting me share, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie.
Yeah. Panelists, any comments on how Black history has affected your recovery, how you promote it? What would you like to see different today?
My name is Christy, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And wow, that was powerful what he just said. But you know, I think I can say what affected my recovery, how Black history affected my recovery, because my trauma started when I was 4 years old, right? And I ran all the way until I was 35 and surrendered, you know, to my recovery, to my
Okay.
my way to recovery. But a lot of times when I felt like if I wasn't light skinned, that was a part of my addiction. That I wouldn't fit in with nobody. If somebody called me black, or whatever and stuff. Now I know that I'm a dark skinned sister, but if somebody called me black, I'll just get more traumatized and I'll be ready to fight. And it started causing me to act out. And I carried that all the way in my addiction until, I surrendered and I found a better way and a new way to look at life. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. But that part about Alexis with the I didn't know why I like the color coming up, as art for me. But that's my groundbreaking thing that I like to do. I like to just color and shade. It's a mind bender for me, and that art has been a part of my recovery as well.
Thank
So
you.
I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just like to add that as African Americans, as we dig into our culture, you're going to find so many colors. You're going to find so much music. It is at the core of who we are. And so I think as we move forward in understanding our history, that we have to continue to build spaces that we can heal internally. Build spaces where we can have these hard conversations and we can share how we feel unapologetically, and so that we can heal. I believe that Rise is a table that has been set for everyone, but especially for the African American who is still trying to find their roots. And then that is in the dance and the song and all the color, and be unapologetic about it. We have to be really honest with ourselves, and that there is a generational trauma that really affects our recovery today. I see it in my mother, I saw it in my grandmother, I saw it in my great-grandmother and my grandfathers. So I'm glad that we're sitting here at this table, shedding light on the fact that that is a part of our recovery. It's not just the drugs and the alcohol, but it is the trauma that comes from the generations. And we have to respect that.
And I was just going to say, let's put any questions in the chat so that we can deal with them as we go along when we have breaks to get questions. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Well, thank you, Reggie. Larissa, do you have something?
yeah, can you hear me okay?
Okay, it's kind of muffled.
I'm gonna switch to I'm gonna switch computers in.
Did you want to say you want to try and switch computers?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be here when you get here. Thank you, Reggie, Alexia, everybody. Haley, a recent report released by the Sound, I'm skipping ahead because I have something I want to talk to Larissa about, so I'm kind of going out of order, forgive me. But Haley, a recent report released by the Center for American Women in Politics identified that a recent report released by the Center for American Women in Politics identified that a significant barrier for women in elected positions is gender and racial bias. Organizations that put pressure on women to adapt to a white, male-dominated world. This results in women being held to a different standard than their male counterparts. This is also true for other organizations as well. And I want everyone to answer this, but start with Haley. What are your experiences being held to a different standard because of gender or race? Have you ever felt pressure to adapt to a white, male-dominated organization just to be successful?
Thank you, Greg. I was just reading over that question, and I honestly, when I think about it being to gender, I can think about all the different times that being in a working environment and being held to a different standard. Sorry, my dog hops on. She thinks she's a superstar too. But being held to a different standard, not being able to make mistakes, and then like being an employee. And when you look at upper structure, it was all dominating white male figures that were in upper structure of organizations. And I'm just feeling like there was never no chance for somebody like me, a white woman who has struggled with substance use disorder for the majority of her life, who would never be able to sit at those same tables. And then, it's funny that you asked me this question, because the other day we were at a leadership meeting and I looked around the room at this leadership meeting, and it was predominantly women in that room. And I just thought, how amazing is that? There's a good bit of males in there, but there was very much diverse population in that leadership meeting. And I felt so honored to be able to look at this organization, that the Georgia Council for Recovery, that I get to work at, and know that there is truly diversity, equity, inclusion there. Everybody is given a fair shot. And, I personally have never felt the pressure to adapt. Normally when I feel that, I guess maybe I have, but normally when I feel something like that, I get away and run as fast as I can, because I have learned through my recovery to stand true to who I am and to not have to adapt to anybody else to be less than, that I am worthy of having a seat at every table that I am wanting to be at. And so thank you again for this opportunity to let me share.
Okay. Tara, do you have something to add?
Well, no, I was just listening to Haley saying that she felt so empowered by seeing, a room full of women. And I have worked, before I started working in recovery, I worked in like some financial institutions. And I remember when I first got to Atlanta, I came from a small town in Virginia. And what I seen different down south was, in that room, it was a lot of African-American men, CEOs there, and that was very different for me. I remember calling back home, sharing that with someone. So I felt empowered, like the feeling that she just had, because I seen the smile on her face when she said she looked around and seen the females dominating the room. I felt empowered when I seen the African American males dominating that agency. It was a financial institution. It was, oh God, 20 years ago, but that was different for me from where I came from, because it was a smaller town and they didn't have that, there. So I just kind of related to her on the opposite end of the spectrum, but I felt the energy coming from her.
What's that energy do for you? Seeing that in that organization?
At that time, it just, I knew I was in the right place, because I think I grew out of that town a long time ago and I moved down south, and it empowered me to keep moving forward. And, even through the time that I was in, it was a group of us, and we just all, we were living very well. I think we got introduced to a different standard, different pay raise, the way of living that was different for us. And I think we were all just enjoying it. And so I just identified with her at that moment. That was the smile.
Larissa, I'll be brief. I won't repeat the whole question, but we're talking about, have you ever had an experience in a workplace or another situation where you felt you had to adapt to a white male-dominated world to be successful?
Absolutely. In my mind, that's a really obvious question as a woman. I don't feel that way in the place that I'm in now. This feels like a nice little bubble where I don't have to worry about that as much, because like Haley said, we have a lot of really powerful women that work here, a diverse group of people that work here. So I don't experience it so much now within the organization, but I absolutely experience it outside of the organization. So particularly with the legislative stuff that we do, going down to the state legislature and having to, let me see how I want to put this, in a state that's predominantly run by that certain demographic that has a certain set of core values. And they also give us around $6 million in funding across the state. There's ways that I feel like I have to hold back who I am and what I believe in and what I stand on when I'm in my role as a leader of a recovery community organization. So it's not necessarily within our organization, but there's ways that I have to kind of tailor what I
can say and what I can do in order to protect that funding for all of our other RCOs across the state, as well as our programs. So and honestly, I think that's the hardest part of my job, is having
Wow.
to, being an advocate at heart, but having to kind of adhere to some of this male-dominated stuff that we have going on, where they don't quite understand the intersectionality of things. So for me, who I am as a woman, who I am as a queer person, who I am as somebody in a interracial relationship, all these different things that make me who I am and part of my being, I have to like hide those when I go down there. And it kind of hurts. Just to be frank, it hurts to have to do that. At times I sit up at night and think about it and think about, am I really standing up for who I am in my communities if I'm not saying something about this stuff? And then the other side of me has to say, okay, well, if I do that, then are all of these people that are being served through our RCOs and through our different programs and organizations, they might not be being served. So yeah, that's something that that's a constant ongoing thing in the world that we live in. And it's I guess it's different in different states and different areas, different legislatures that they have to deal with. But that's kind of the reality of the place that we're in now, and just finding a way to sit with it and rock with that reality. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And you helped me be who I am. So you do what you do well. Thank you. Alexia, Reggie, how about you all? What male-dominated world? What dominated world? What's that been your experience?
I would, I'm sorry, Alexa, you can go ahead. I'll go. Yeah, I just want to share a poem about that. I'm sitting here trying, it's been years since I read. This is either Nina Simone or Maya Angelou, but it's called White Snow. She says, I woke up this morning feeling kind of good. Took a look out my window at my black neighborhood. Turned on the telly, watched some of my best black shows. Propped my glasses down on my beautiful black nose. Went to the kitchen, cooked some of my best black food. Listened to some of my best black music, put me in a real black mood. Opened the door, got ready to go. Damn. White snow. And what she meant by that was, guys, inside of my own environment, in this society that we live in, this white male Christian dominated society, in my own environment, in my own home, in my own neighborhood, with my own friends, I can be as black as I want to be, or as queer as I want to be, or as whatever as I want to be. But when I step out into this white male dominated society, I have to leave that stuff at home. She says, when I opened the door and got ready to go, damn, white snow. I've got to go out into this white male dominated world, and I have to leave a part of who I am, what I believe, who I love, all these different kinds of things. And this is the type of equality that we need to be fighting for now. I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to share that point with you all.
Thank you. Alexia, you were gonna share?
Yeah, I just want to say that, all of that is absolutely true. But if I would have likened myself to any woman in history, I would say Harriet Tubman. But she was not going to lay down and take it. And she took everybody with her. And I feel like we are coming into a time where we can, through this recovery movement, create new standards and lift up a new way of thinking. And so maybe it's just me, but when I walk in the room, I may be wrong as two left shoes, but I'm holding my head up and I'm going to say what I mean and mean what I say. And so I wonder if we actually have to continue to succumb to what is, because that hasn't gotten us healed and whole, none of us. And my hope is that, in this world of recovery, we create a new standard, we create a new culture that says respect, that says anybody is welcome to the table, that we stand up for that. So I'm hoping that as we continue to have these conversations and build our RCOs, that no matter what RCO I go into in the world or in the state or in the country, that I will be treated equal, and that we will carry this as a part of the recovery movement legacy. You know, unfortunately, it's not like that, you know, but I believe that we can get there if we continue to have these kind of conversations.
Wow, thank you. I'd like to, if you all okay, move on to Women's History Month. I mean, this has been fantastic. I wish we had a lot more time. Fortunately, I know all of you, and I can dig into this more later, but Larissa, this one's yours. To start off with, I'd like everybody to comment. March is Women's History Month. The theme is Women Who Advocate for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The theme recognizes women throughout the country who understand that for a positive future, we need to eliminate bias and discrimination entirely from our lives and institutions. How have past advocacy efforts by women for women impacted your life? What could be done to improve women's rights? And is there a special woman that inspired you, and why was she so inspirational?
For me, there's some obvious names that come to mind, like Gloria Steinman, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Tarana Burke with the Me Too movement. There's these pioneer women that really made an impact that give me the basic rights. Like one, I can be here, I can have my baby here with me, I can be a woman, exist in the workplace and not have to be at home in the kitchen. I can vote, I can do all these different things. So there's that side of it where it's these women that made basically fought for us to have some basic human rights as women. And I think about it too on the like professional local level of some of the mentors that I've had in my life. And obviously for me, the first one that comes to mind is Neil, and the way she taught me to use my voice, and that my voice matters, and that the voice of all women matter and all people matter, and to constantly look at who doesn't have a seat at the table. And if that means that if there's an opportunity that comes up and there's somebody that doesn't have a seat at the table and we can't get another seat at the table, give them my seat. So it's not about ego. It's not about me being the one speaking out all the time necessarily. Sometimes give up my seat, let somebody else have the seat if there's not, if all the voices aren't going to be able to be represented. She was the first one that taught me to really speak in a public setting. My mom is, I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but she's the woman that has inspired me the most in life. She grew up, but her mom married some pretty awful men. One of them even had his own Wikipedia page, just grew up in this home where she had to fight and take care of her siblings and her family and be the parent in it. And she always taught us this thing, because I'd ask her, how are you still so close to your mom, even with all the stuff that you went through and what happened? And she'd always tell me people are doing the best they can with what they know. So no matter what the situation, people are doing the best they can with what they know. And until they know more, they're not going to make a change. So so that's always sitting with me in the back of my head is, what is it that I can do within my own inner circle to help educate, to help empower, to help lift up? And it might not necessarily be standing on a stage in front of 1,000 people advocating for something. It might be in these small conversations that we're having, or I go out to lunch with a friend and subject of race comes up, or diversity comes up, or inclusion comes up. And that might be just as powerful of an agent of change as it would be standing in front of a crowd. I don't enjoy public speaking for the most part. I'm more of an introverted person, so I enjoy those one-on-one conversations much more anyways. And my idea of what it means to be a woman it's been going through a shift since becoming a mom and experiencing everything that comes along with that. And when Neil was retiring and I was pregnant and I was coming into this role and the hormones were going and I was ready to fight constantly and throw punches, and I started looking into other women that were in leadership roles going through similar experiences. And one of the ones that stood out was Jacinda Ardern. She was a former prime minister for New Zealand, and she was also pregnant at the time, one of the first prime ministers to ever give birth while in office. And she has all these wonderful speeches that I listened to and all these different quotes that I read from her. And her whole thing was all about inclusive leadership, and that you can be strong and still be compassionate. Being compassionate is not a weakness. You can stand up for what you believe in, but also still be compassionate, still lead with kindness. And it got me thinking, like, that's really what I relate to when I think about diversity and equity and inclusion and how to do that. And I don't have to be, it's okay to be kind is the main gist of it. And the kindness is what brings the inclusivity. So the more I lean into that, instead of thinking that I have to be this big, tough, strong person and come with all the ideas and only my voice is heard, the more I lean into that kindness and including others, the more it lifts up women, lifts up diversity.
Thank you. Kindness and giving your seat up for someone else is what I really took out of that. Thank you. That was great.
Yes, Larissa, I couldn't have said it better. I think that we as women have the capacity to nurture as opposed to being gatekeepers. And so we don't have to be rude and mean and pushy. You know, that's what the culture has said we need to be. But when we are nurturing through the very nature of who we are, it's like, it's a beautiful thing when you can see another sister, another woman rise to her fullest capacity, or another brother rise to their fullest capacity, and that's through love. I appreciate what you just said. That was good. Thank you.
Haley.
Yeah, you right on time. Thank you, Larissa. I was wondering, I was like, Larissa's probably going to take the words right out of my mouth because I know we've had that conversation before. But when I originally read this question, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm really no history buff, but if there's one woman that has inspired me, it was when I was 2 weeks into recovery and some people around me were like, hey, come with me to ARAD. And I watched Neil Campbell take that stage, and I was just in awe. You know, I had never seen a woman who spoke with such determination and belief and fire. If you cannot convince me there was not fire breathing out of her mouth that day, and not for any other reason, but because it was so powerful. And I was like, I don't know what they're even talking about right now or what they're doing, but I want to be a part of this. And, you know, I sometimes I find myself wondering if I wouldn't have been there that day, if I wouldn't have seen that fire in somebody, the way that she was talking about recovery. I'd never heard recovery talked about in such a manner. And it just really set me out on this journey to be an advocate, to speak out loud, to learn the language, you know, to be inclusive. And I think about that all the time. When I just moved to a new area, I always think about Neil saying, make a seat at the table, look around you, who's not there. I just moved to this area, and it's not a very diverse area, y'all. I've been going to do my things in recovery, and I'm like looking around, I'm like, where are my African-American brothers and sisters out here? Why are they not in these spaces? You know, I would never even know to think like that. You know, so I've started talking to other people in my recovery network here that I've just began to make, saying, what can we do? How can we make a space where they feel comfortable enough to walk into? Because I'm not going to lie, when I first moved out here, I did not feel comfortable going there myself, and it was predominantly all older white people in this meeting, and I was like, oh my God, this is not where I belong, you know. But I do belong there, because if I'm not there, who else is going to look around and say, who else isn't here? what kind of space do we need in this area where it's going to bring more people to the table and give others the same chance at recovery that I've been given? And so I will always be grateful for Neil for getting up on that stage and taking that stance and talking about recovery the way that she does. And you as well, Larissa, you've done such a great job at showing up, suiting up with a baby in tow, and just continuing to be a trailblazer. And I'm really grateful for that.
All right, who inspires you?
I'm just smiling because I hear like recovery is like a really big deal in my life. It was when I heard Larissa talking, my mom is a big deal to me. She's a big deal. Like, I just gotta say it. Like, she was strong in her family. She was a lead in her family. She made a way out of no way for me and my brother. You know, she taught us, you know, how to take the state a little bit higher, you know, how to be a woman of your word, do what you say, mean what you say. So when I heard these things, it just, you know, I knew when I took a turn and you know, I came back around, I knew what to do because she had already instilled it in me as growing up. And then when I got to recovery and I seen women, you know, like just saying I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I knew what I was not gonna do. And I was in treatment at Right Side Up, and the staff there were strong women. They were so strong. I liked watching them coming to work. The participants, I mean, we were all there, but I would watch them come to work, stand in front of a group of us and talk and give us information and education about how to change our life. And I like what her name is Gwen, and she already know that she is one of the really important people in my life. She would say, we're going to give y'all some information, and we're not saying it's going to work. We're not saying it's a guarantee, but if you try it, you might like it and you'll do some things different in your life. And that led to so many other doors being open by just not using and working on our behavior. And so when I got in a chair and I was able to make some decisions and make some moves, you know, when Larissa said just having those conversations was just one-on-one with other women, just about making a difference and doing things different in their life is major. Like, we can do some big stuff, but the little stuff what matters too. I remember driving a van with a woman on the van and her telling me years later that conversation meant the world to her. I don't even remember what I said, but you know, because I remember the conversations I had with somebody late at night, the overnight staff, when I was having a moment like I'm gonna just get up and leave, and her saying, Tara, you might want to take a look at that. You know, just advocating for women. Advocacy is a big deal for me, and I love the fact that we see so many other people doing it today. So women around me in my life, I choose very wisely, and I love watching other women just glow and grow and do all kind of great stuff. Sometimes I be on social media, be like, look, right. Every now and then, Haley will tell me about somebody that in her area that I know, and I'd be like, oh my God, you know, she kept on pushing, and I show up, I seen people at A-Rad that I hadn't seen in 5 years when they left treatment, but they still showing up. And it makes a big deal, telling me all these beautiful things they doing in their county or the places where they living at. They opening doors and being part of RCOs. Just one of the participants I used to work with, she's just opened up an RCO in her county. Like, I'm just amazed, and I'm so happy to be a part of the journey to see women in me and growing and making moves that I know they surprised. I'm surprised. We all surprised. But then again, we're really not surprised because we know that everything we need is inside of us.
Reggie, is there a woman that has inspired you? What have you seen?
Well, guys, there's an entire group of women that absolutely inspire me. This is probably going to sound cliche. Some people are going to say, well, there he goes again, but oh well. It is the entire lineage of women who were transported from Africa over to what we call now the Americas, North, South America, and the Caribbeans. Studying, well, first off, one of those women was my mother. So that's my absolute hero. But just understanding and coming to have an appreciation for the plight of the African woman who was, from the time that they were captured or sold by some of their own people sometimes. But from the time that they came into contact with those who would make them slaves, just the plight of those women, from simply being in the belly of a ship for 3 or 4 straight months, having to deal with female things. Just think about that. Here's a woman in the bottom of a ship for 3 or 4 straight months, not getting the necessary things that she needs, that females need. How much strength, how much resilience, how much fight do you have to have in you to not just give up during that process? And then getting to the place that they were going. It's the psychological, emotional, mental, sexual, physical abuse that this group of women have endured and still endure to this day is astonishing. It's absolutely amazing that they are able to do the things that they have done. Imagine having your child ripped out of your arms and given to somebody at 2 or 3 years old, and you never see them again, and you don't get a chance to grieve. There is no therapy that you're going to. You are not getting any pills. You are going to the fields the very same day that your child is ripped out of your arms and sold. The practice was when they gave birth to a child, they would give them 2 days. If you gave birth on Sunday, on Tuesday, you were back in the cotton field. Imagine that. Imagine that. And sometimes you never even saw that child. Once that child was born, you may have never saw it again, but you had to go out in the fields and work. Imagine the strength that takes. I used to wonder why I belong to the only demographic of people on this planet who call disciplining their children a whipping. Think about that. In my neighborhood, your mama gonna whip you, you gonna get a whipping. Nobody else does that. Nobody says that. You're going to get corporal punishment. You're going to get a spanking. So I was like, why is it? And my mother would whip me. She would whip my behind with all types of things. And I found out, guys, where they came from. They had a practice on the plantation that if a young child, particularly a young African-American boy, did something that the sanction for that was a whipping, they would take the child and tie him up to a post, and they would tell his mother, you whip him or I'm going to whip him. And if the mother didn't whip him hard enough, guess what happened? Then the master, or whatever you want to call him, he would beat the boy half to death. So the Black mother learned that in order to spare my child from the whip of the master, I'm gonna have to beat him close to death my own self. That's where that practice came into the African-American experience. That's why my mother said, called what she did to me a whipping, because her mother called what she did to her a whipping, and her grandmother, and so on and so forth, all the way back to the plantation. And I don't mean to go too far off on that, but I'm just trying to express the amount of love and respect and admiration that I have for African-American women in this country. It is just absolutely amazing if you study and understand the history of what these beautiful creatures have been through. Thanks.
Thank you. No, you did not go too far off. Thank you. Obviously, all of you speak out for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I can see it now. I'm sure in your life you do that. And Tara, I want to start with you though. But when has speaking out for DEI put you at risk? When did it,
So many times. Well, one time in particular, I held a position at a agency, and sometimes at that agency, different people came from all different walks of life. And sometimes for that woman, 3 meetings a week in church wasn't her choice. That just wasn't what she wanted to do. Sometimes she didn't want to go to that church. That wasn't her belief. That's not what she was raised in, but it was a schedule, and it was kind of like a cookie cutter. So sometimes the women would go along with it for fear of not having a bed. sometimes they will advocate for themselves. And so I would advocate with them. If they were strong enough to advocate for themselves, then I would advocate with them to say, hey, this is not what she gonna do today. She gonna do something different. So I always was told myself if I ever got in a position, some of those rules I would change. So time passed, I was able to get in a position and I was able to change some of those rules and write some of those policies. I wrote some of those policies that allowed that woman to do something different if that wasn't her belief system, for her to go, if she was Catholic, if she was Baptist, if she was Christian, as long as that she followed the guidelines and got the set amount of activities a week, then let's choose those activities. Let's allow her to choose those activities. And I went up against a lot of rap for that sometimes. I got called to the red carpet about that quite a few times, but it prevails. Those women were able to change to where they went to church at or where they worship at, or if they wanted to go to an AA meeting, an NA meeting, a CA meeting, or go for a walk. Some of them like to go down to the river and just go for a walk. And we was able to put that in place to make sure that happened. Whether it's still happening or not, I don't know. But while I was there, we did change some of those policies. And it wasn't an easy task. But it was one that needed to happen. And we also was able to give the women an opportunity to be a part of a program once they completed the program, where they was able to set up a part of the program where they could save their money. They used to pay up a certain amount to that program, but that was able to change after a few long meetings about giving that woman a jump start when she leave the program so she could have a fresh start in life, to get on her feet, to be able to get a place. You know, the cost of living is very high. To be able to buy a vehicle, get insurance on it, and have a safe place to stay is very expensive. So we were able to put some rules in place and a system in place to allow her to pay herself a certain percentage of her income and monitor that so she could have those amounts of money when she left.
Who else has put yourself at risk to speak up? What happened?
I worked for an inpatient program for young people. And when they would bring them into the program, they would ask them questions that were just re-traumatizing, in my opinion. And so first of all, they came in there shackled, orange jumpsuits on. And, I just got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. These are children between the ages of 14 and 18 years old. And so I had to advocate for a different way to do an intake. Like, you're asking when the last time you did this, when the last time you did that, and how many times did you do it? And no one ever asked them, what are you passionate about? What gives you joy? What's right with you today? And so I had to advocate for there to be more questions in the intake process, and that we would honor the answers to those questions. If they were passionate about cooking, then we made sure that they had the opportunity to do so. If they were passionate about theater or dancing or playing basketball, that they would have the opportunity to do so. And so I found myself in a situation where I really had to advocate for these young people to be able to have a life called recovery, even within the program. And then they really embraced it, but then the options was taken away from them. And I've never been so crushed in my life. And once I got through being crushed, I got back up and I started again. And as a result of that, we created a really great program within that same program for them to present, for them to share through arts. And, advocacy is not easy because it addresses change. And I love what Sherry Jenkins Tucker used to say, change ain't easy, but it's inevitable. And I am the evidence of that. So, yeah, that's my story.
Thank you. Haley.
Yes, thanks, Greg. I was just thinking about, I was really trying to rack my brain, and then it dawned on me, I'm a person in recovery from opioid use. And for a long time, I tried to find recovery through all the traditional ways, and they were just never enough for me. And so eventually it led me to begin taking medicated assisted treatment, become a part of a medicated assisted treatment program. And that, since finding that and combining it with other things that I'd found along my journey, it worked. I was able to sustain my recovery. I was able to start working on the inside of me and start getting better. I was able to make it past 90 days. You know, it was a miracle. But then I was also afraid to tell these people in these other settings that this was a part of what I was doing. This is what was helping me. And my mama did not raise me to be quiet. She raised me to speak my truth. And so I always just felt like I was leaving something out. And so I began to talk about it in these spaces. And I am that evidence, you know, and I was so terrified of what other people were going to say about me. Would I be thrown out of these spaces? Was I going to tell, were they going to try to take away what I thought my recovery was? And was I going to succumb to it when they tried to do that? But what I found is that by living my recovery out loud, you know, I've met people who were totally against it. But by being honest with them and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing right now, and it's obviously working. You know, I've watched people's entire perspective surrounding medications like Suboxone, Vivitrol, methadone, buprenorphine, and even the newer things like Sublocade. Like, I've watched people's entire perspectives on that change. And it's not just me, but I just that's talking about it out loud. But I know that for me in my circle, and even just last week at a convention, I brought it up because it needs to be talked about. These people who take medications to support their recovery. They deserve to be in the same spaces as anybody else if that's where they choose to be. And regardless of what other people's opinions are, recovery is about having compassion for another person. It's not about being judgmental. Recovery belongs to the person. So it doesn't matter what your opinions are, and it doesn't matter if you like it. We're there to have compassion and love for one another, regardless of what medications people are taking. And so I will forever speak out loud about being on medicated assisted treatment because it saved my life. It saved my life. And, you know, people will say, oh, well, there's a start and an end date to it. No, there's not. And that might be my story, but that doesn't mean it has to be your story. And if you choose to stay on medicated assisted recovery, if that is your recovery pathway, then just know that I'm here and I support that.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I want to jump ahead to another question as we are running out of time. But I am a peer coach, and in my experience, it seems that women are judged more harshly for the things they experience in addiction. The women I serve in recovery tend to experience far more regret and shame, and their families seem to set recovery bar much higher than they do for men. Did any of you experience this? And what barriers to discrimination did you face as a woman or an African American in recovery and seeking recovery? What barriers do you see today with the women and African Americans whom you serve? And how do we overcome those? How did you overcome those?
You know, my recovery started when I was pregnant, you know, and using, you know. And I remember going to the Grady Hospital and then put me on the ultrasound, and I could see my baby. And the response from the doctors was not good. There was no encouragement for recovery. It was just like, you know what, you just a mess, and I don't know what you're gonna do with your life. And I remember saying over and over again after I left that hospital that morning, I said to myself, I might be addicted, but that don't keep me from being a mother. And I walked out of there and I said that all the way back home. I said it, I may be addicted, but that don't keep me from being a mother. And then I found a whole bunch of beautiful African-American women in the basement of a church in Tallahassee, Florida. And I connected with other women who had faith and who had strength. And I could see myself in them raising their children. And we together raised a community of children because we had to. See, because we didn't have the insurance. We didn't have the support that most white women were getting at that time. And we created a community where there was no community. You know, if I had my food stamps and she had her food stamps and they had their food stamps, we were feeding everybody's kids. You know, we were taking care of each other's children. We were loving on one another, praying for one another, crying with one another, dancing, singing with one another. And we created a community. So yeah, there was a barrier, but even within our community, we created another community so that we could thrive, not just survive, but thrive. And as a result of that, we broke down barriers. We broke down barriers within our community where we were being called all kinds of names. And we broke down barriers within the system that was in that particular community, the law enforcement, the probation officers, the jailers, because we raised up and we created our own. I always say, where there's a wall, climb over it and take it by force. You know, that's just my mentality. That's just the way I think about things. And I feel like, again, like I said earlier, you know, I'm praying that this recovery movement will move in a different way, that we don't repeat history as we know it, but we will embrace people that don't look like us. And then we will respect and honor one another in our respective places. So even within these walls, you know, because I've heard it said, you know, medicine-assisted treatment is not recovery. That's a lie. That is a lie. When I saw a friend of mine who was on the brink of death grab a hold of medicine-assisted treatment, I was so glad because it saved her life. And she's a millionaire today. She is a millionaire doing the thing. So I'm just hopeful that even in this conversation that we're having, and we go back to our prospective places, that we keep these conversations in our heart and be the change we want to see in the world.
Thank you. Hey, Larissa, what barriers do you see that women and African Americans face that others don't in recovery?
I mean, we do a lot of work with our maternal peer support program, and it's all moms either pregnant, postpartum, just gave birth, in recovery, or maybe seeking recovery, needing recovery. And the amount of stigma that they face from every single professional group that they come in contact with is like, I don't want to say no wonder they keep using, but no wonder it's harder to find recovery when you face that over and over and over again. And it's been improving over time, but I know when we first went into the hospital system in Northeast Georgia, and we were talking to, baby's waking up, sorry. We were talking to the hospital staff about it and their views on it. There was a lot of pushback on it, on how it should be addressed, because there was a whole thing where, you know, a nurse would hand a mom their baby and say, "You did this. Look what you did," because the baby was struggling with substance dependence, not addiction, because babies can't be born addicted, substance dependence. And it's just like this beat down on the women, and we've seen almost a complete turnaround now. So there have been people that experience that speaking up about it, saying, we're not going to take this anymore. We have some of the worst maternal mortality rates in the country. And this stuff is not helping us at all. So we've started to see some changes there, but it's such a systematic issue. And it's so ingrained that it's not just the hospital system. It's DFACs. How are they being treated by DFACs? How are they being treated by their families? How are they being treated by, I don't know, if they come in contact with law enforcement? And then you think about the mortality rates, it's way, way higher for women of color. So it's this huge, huge issue. And I took this class one time, and I was on there was a lot of stuff, there still is a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And a big part of it was the disparities within the healthcare system and the quality of care that certain people receive. And so they started talking to us about the breakdown of demographics of healthcare providers, And I pulled some of those. So 2% of psychiatrists are African American, 4% of psychologists, 5.7% of doctors, 7% of marriage and family counselors, and 11% of professional counselors. So there's all these disparities happening within the healthcare system, and it's just perpetuating again that that intersectionality, just perpetuating all these issues when we're not seeing ourselves represented in the services that we're receiving. So all of that combined, that's a whole lot of different levels of stigma and discrimination happening. And women face a huge part of it. And we're seeing that not just in how we feel, but in the way that health outcomes are. So people are just being discriminated against. And I love what Alexia was saying too, that even though it's happening, like we're finding ways to go around it. Like we still have our recovery community. We still have people we can lean on. Even if the doctor won't listen to me when I say such and such is wrong, I can call a friend, I can call a CARES, I can call somebody from my recovery network, and they can say, yeah, no, me too. That was similar to my experience. And we can band together and we can fight against this and educate and start to see a change. It's going to take a long time. It's a slow process, but the more we keep going with it, the less stories we'll have to hear over and over again from women experiencing that shame and guilt.
Well, I just would like to say that this past weekend, I went with the Morehouse School of Medicine, young Black men that are thriving and upcoming doctors and psychologists, and oh my goodness, 56 of them. And we all went to South Carolina to the Avery Research Center, and they come to RISE and they learn and they understand, and they are mixing with the community, and we are sharing with them about peer support and how recovery looks different on everybody. So we're doing our part.
Love it.
And I just want to just lift that up because change is on the way.
Thank you.
You, Alexia. Thank you.
Tara, Haley, Reggie, what have you faced? What do you see out there?
Well, I just want to say just want to bring in, I always bring up prisons and jails and reentry, because there's so many women that get arrested and they have their children while they are incarcerated. I had the pleasure, I want to say, of assisting a woman a few months ago who was pregnant when she got, arrested. She was locked up and she didn't have anybody to give her baby to, but she was writing me, I seen her. I used to do hospitals and institutions, go to the crisis center because the crisis center was a part of my path. And I met her in there. We stayed in contact, and we got a auntie who would take her kid for her, just being a part of the process of her having to have their baby, let the baby go, but her auntie was able to get the baby, and that she's in a situation now where she's getting some assistance, and it's a CARES that showed up for her. And I just found out that, it just kind of happened, and she was telling me about it, and she was telling me, I think she kind of do some of the stuff you do. And it just warmed my heart that somebody that CARES was on the loving inside of making that smooth transition for her, getting her child from one spot to the other, because imagine having to do something as detrimental as that already. And she was addicted. And so, in addiction, we do things that we're not always proud of, and just the kindness of it is great, and being a part of seeing it. And I was in the CARES Academy last week, and one of the women there was telling me, one of the peers was telling me that she had a situation when she had her baby, and this person helped her, and that person was a CARES also. And she told me that what made her want to come to the academy. So I just thought that is amazing. So yes, we are making some changes. We're making some remarkable changes in this community. And when I see it, I am amazed. I am, I have, all walks of life of different women and people that text me and call me and tell me they love me. Some of them white. I didn't grow up in a white neighborhood, so I didn't come up with a lot of white friends. But I can say today that I do have white people in my life that I know that they care about me, I care about them, and we care about each other recovery. So with that being said, I do see the change. I see the change every day, and I want us to just keep moving forward. With every little bit that everybody do, we make it better.
Thank you. We got a few minutes left and we've neglected our audience. Al, I think you had a few questions in chat you wanted to get to.
In the chat, we see more shout outs to the panelists, which is really awesome. You should all check and see the shout outs that you've gotten as you've spoken. We did just have a question from Reginald McKenzie, and it's almost more of a comment. It's that with things that have happened politically and with the reversal of Roe v. Wade, are we regressing back into the past or the Stone Age as far as women's equality goes? So if anyone would like to address that.
Yeah, I'd like to address it. I think that's a good question. Reggie, Cares 21, by the way. But no, we're not letting that happen. That will not happen. They can keep fighting and they can keep putting all these rules against us and laws against us, but we won't let that happen. No, I know too many strong, powerful women that are going to stand up and fight, and they might gain a little ground sometime against it. But at the end of the day, it's maybe they win a battle, but in my opinion, no.
Okay. Al, was there anything else?
There is not. I was going to see Stephanie Primrose has had her hand up for a while. I was going to see if she would like to say something. And Stephanie, I've asked you to unmute if you want to chime in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This whole thing had me thinking about something. Being an African American woman at that, back when I was coming up, mental health in the Black community was not spoke about. Like, nobody wanted to be quote unquote crazy. I'm dual diagnosed, and my passion is is trying to let people know that mental health is not bad, because that was one of the reasons why I used, because of my different mental health diagnoses. And the agency that I work for, it is women that come in there, and being a person who suffers from mental health, I can see it. I can identify it, and I know what it is. And sometimes colleagues and coworkers, oh, they tripping. They just want to go use, but it's a different facet to that. And I hear it talked about, but it's not very prevalent. And it's just something that, I'm passionate about that, because again, mental health has strong is strong with me because I suffer from it. And addiction and mental health don't necessarily go hand in hand, but with some of us it is. And I just would, I like to see it more prevalent, if you can understand what I'm saying.
Anyone want to comment on that? Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much.
I would. I know for me, it was, I grew up in a home where there was a lot of, my parents fought a lot. And my mother, my dad always called her that ugly C word. And then he would throw other languages out there, other labels out there. And it never really made sense to me. And, my mom was well into her 40s before she ever sought any kind of help. And so that's what, when Larissa was talking earlier, that it was trauma. My mom had endured trauma at such a young age, and she did, as an adult, as a parent, she did the best with what she could. And it wasn't until that mental health was addressed for my mom that this cycle in our family, that generational curse in our family, the walls, the shackles began to break off of us. You know, my mom sought after that healing. And then a few years later, I was beginning to seek recovery. And I'm what you call a chronic recoverer. So I kept coming back. I wasn't willing to stop. And, you know, and it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going. And, you know, there is healing. And I believe that substance abuse and mental health, they do go hand in hand. I mean, for goodness sake, it's in the DSM-5, and I'm not going to get all into that, but yeah, so I think that we do need to speak out more loud about it, and we do need to show up in these spaces and talk about mental health in the African American communities and the shame and the stigma that surround it as well, especially for women, because women feel like they have to be this super powerful mom, a warrior, you know, protector, employee, you know, and we needed to be taking care of ourselves as well as women, and we deserve that space.
I would just like to say that I totally get it. In the African American community, you know, you don't want to say anything about your mental health. However, we have to tell our stories. You know, gone are the days where we keeping secrets, you know, and that's easier said than done. But when I became a CARES, I realized I could live my recovery out loud. And I never forget standing up in the middle in church, and they said, anybody want to give a testimony? And I said, yes, my name is Alexia. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And I did my whole speech. And my mom was pulling on my dress, telling me, you need to sit down. Now, do you have to tell everything? And yeah, I had to tell everything. You know, I have to tell everything. And as a result of that, it was so many people after church standing around whispering, sis, this is what's going on. Sis, this is what's going on. And so now at my church, you know, they call me, you know, when something is going on, and I give them the support they need, and I'm not gossiping about what nobody else is going through in the church. So I'm a trusted confidant, you know, but I am that one that stood up and said, hey, this is my story. So, you know, Stephanie, you know, if you get opportunities to share your story, I don't care if it's at the family picnic or, you know, with a sister in the bathroom somewhere, share your story and let them know we do recover. We do recover, and there is no shame.
Thanks.
So I just wanted to share that.
I hate to do this, but our time is up. Thank you all for allowing me to do this. Thank you for sharing. Maybe we can do this again in a month or two, because we need a lot more of this. Like our call to action is in front of you. We need to create opportunities to include Blacks and women in your hiring community and support initiatives. Learn more about and share your knowledge of Black and women's history. Become allies of and promote DEI at home, at work, and our communities. Once again, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, panelists, and everybody. Have a great day and keep it up, panelists. Please keep doing what you're doing, and let me know what I need to do. And have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Look for your certificates in your email sometime next week. I'll include contact information, emails for all of the panelists if you'd like to reach out.
Thank you, Greg. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for holding this space for us this evening.
Thank
Great
you,
job,
everybody.
everybody. It was wonderful.
Hey, yes.